Good evening. It is good to see each of you here this evening. Grateful for your presence and want to take a moment and thank you for the prayers on my family's behalf. Many of you know already, but if you don't, the boys, Caden and Ty, both have the flu, and Caden developed symptoms last Tuesday, Ty on Thursday, and so we're going back and forth with them. They seem to have turned the corner. Hopefully within the next few days they'll be back up to their rambunctious selves. But thank you for the prayers. So far the girls are staying healthy. We've kept everybody separated as best we can, and it seems to have been working. So thank you for that, and if you would, please continue to pray that especially McKenna doesn't get it. It can be rather hard on her given her already complicated health conditions. Tonight we are going to continue our study from the book of Titus, and if you recall, last Sunday evening, we kind of set the stage for the necessity of elders. You know, this is a big part of the letter to Titus, talking about what makes a man qualified to be an elder. But first we have to understand why elders are so important. A lot of congregations just kind of brush it off. We'll get to it when we can. You know, hopefully somebody will walk through the door and be qualified, and we go. You know, we have to take a more active role as a congregation in seeking to abide by God's standards when it comes to leadership. And so we have to understand then, what is a qualified elder? What makes a qualified elder? The necessity of having elders in every congregation, like I said, beyond question. Submitting to them is also beyond question. I'm sure you can think of issues in the past where an eldership made a decision and somebody, well, I don't like that. And they want to try to throw pebbles under the shoes of everybody, and they want to stir up trouble, and if they don't get their way, then they just go on down the road, and we'll just take our thoughts and our ideas elsewhere. As a congregation, we have a responsibility to submit to our leaders. Look at what the writer of Hebrews said in Hebrews chapter 13 in verse 17. It says, obey those who rule over you and be submissive. Now some might say, oh, well, maybe he's talking about secular leadership and he's talking about government and that kind of thing. Well, maybe, but let's continue on reading. For they watch out for your souls. Who is it that watches out for your souls? Oh, it's not the president, it's not the mayor, it's not any kind of secular position, is it? No, it's our leaders within the church, our elders. Be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. They are going to be held accountable for the souls that they shepherd. That's us. They're going to be accountable for us and our salvation, as well as their own. Grief. Don't make it hard on them, the writer is saying. They have a difficult job as leaders of a congregation. There are a lot of moving pieces within a congregation that they have to take into consideration. Do you understand that not any two of us are alike? When it comes to personalities, when it comes to how to interact with people, and they have to be able to interact and get along and be able to talk with all of us. That's a lot to ask. That's a lot to demand. And we shouldn't make it any harder than what it already is. He says, let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. Having an eldership that is troubled by its members is going to have a hard time being successful. It's going to have a hard time accomplishing what it should. How easy is it? Think about an actual shepherd with real sheep. How easy is it to keep the flock all together when you've got 5 or 6 sheep that are just determined to bolt for the gate every time it opens? Or always looking for that hole in the fence to get through. They're always looking for a way to cause trouble and stir up strife and make it all about them And yes, the shepherd is going to work to bring them back into the fold, confident that the rest of the fold is still going to be there and that the other shepherds are helping, but as soon as they turn their back, man, there goes that sheep for that hole again. Let's not be the ones that are always trying to find a way out. Let's be the ones that are right there with them, submitting to their rule. Each party has a great responsibility in this relationship, both the elders and the congregation. So therefore, the necessary conclusion is that the correct men must be appointed to the position. Having a shepherd that curls up under a shade tree and sleeps the day away is not going to be a good watchman, is he? He's not qualified for the job. And so we have to make sure that the elders within the Lord's church are qualified properly for that position. To stick with the analogy, so that they don't fall asleep on the job or try to abuse the position to their own betterment, and a whole host of other reasons that I'm sure you can think of. But a congregation cannot appoint just any man to be an elder just so the position is filled. Have you ever heard someone say having elders is better than not having them? That's a dangerous statement. Having qualified elders is better than not having elders. But just having men in a position to fill the position is not a wise move. I have been part of congregations that did things for a while according to men's meetings, right? The bane of every congregation's existence. Men's meetings. Now, there were some that, for all intents and purposes, it went well. Not ideal, but it went well. It's not supposed to be ideal, because that's not how God designed it, is it? But, that being aside, there have been some I've been part of where you could almost sell tickets like to a wrestling match, where they are literally at each other's throats. And it's like, brethren, can we actually call ourselves that while we are hooping and hollering at each other and degrading one another? And what's the answer to that? Oh, we have to have an eldership. We've got to have an eldership. And do you know what they oftentimes do? They will appoint those very men that have been causing all kinds of problems in the meetings as elders. Do you think it's going to get any better? Absolutely not. But at least you don't have to deal with it anymore, right? I don't have to go on Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoons or whenever to these meetings. Now they can just fight amongst themselves behind closed doors. That is not benefiting anybody. I know we can think of congregations that have been greatly harmed because those who were appointed as elders weren't qualified to hold that position. Churches have been split because the wrong men held the position of an elder. As we begin examining the God-given qualifications of elders, which we're going to do over the next few lessons, I want to start with some general statements regarding looking at elder qualifications. The first one is, we should not look at these as boxes to check, but as qualities of a Christian life. And a lot of times, how do we do it? We pick an individual and we say, Steve Smith, is he qualified to be an elder? Well, let's see what the passages say. We'll open up Titus chapter 1, we'll open up 1 Timothy chapter 3, and we'll lay them side by side. We'll say, does he have this? Yep, he does. Does he have this? Absolutely. And we start making these check marks. Well, what happens whenever you employ a check mark system? Well, you may run into a case where maybe not all the boxes are checked. What then? But I want to ask you, what characteristics do we read about that are demanded of elders which are not demanded of all Christians? What characteristic, what quality is there that an elder should have that I shouldn't have? Not a single one of them. Now, ladies, I know some may be sitting there thinking, well, I'm a woman, so I can't be a husband of one wife. Well, absolutely, that is correct. But can you be faithful in your marriage? That is also correct. That is what you are called to do. Now, you may not be able to fill that demand specifically, being a husband to one wife, but you can fill the general command, which is being faithful in your marriage. And we'll develop that more as we get to that qualification later. But the point is, this is not a majority rules situation. And a lot of times this is what we end up doing. We'll look at a man and we'll believe that he possesses most of the qualities, but maybe he lacks in a couple. Kind of going back to our series we had on the fruit of the Spirit. Well, I have 5 out of the 7, and so that's good. That's majority, right? I'm doing all right. No, we can't have most and meet the standard. We can't have all but one and meet the standard. It is the sum of the qualities, S-U-M, the sum of the qualities, not some, S-O-M-E, of the qualities that are to be met. And then as we examine these qualities, we must not inject our own think-sos into what they mean. Have you ever been in a class discussion or a class setting talking about elder qualifications? And so we're going to talk about an elder must be holy. What does that mean? Well, Sister so-and-so thinks it means this. Well, then Brother so-and-so, well, he has a different idea. He thinks it means this. Our approach must be, what conclusion is demanded by the text? That's it. Not what spin do I think we need to put on it, but what conclusion is demanded by the text. For example, the qualification an elder must be holy. Let's talk about this for just a minute. There are some that define being holy almost to where you are pious like as unto a monk, basically. That is what it means to be holy. That is what they expect of someone who is holy. And so that means that to them, an elder can never laugh or tell a joke. That's not being holy. Engage in recreation, because that wouldn't be considered proper for a holy person to do. And so by their own definition, that man would laugh at a joke, tell a joke, engage in fun recreation, would not be qualified to be an elder. Now, what I have to ask you is that the conclusion that's warranted by the text? I'm going to say no, and we'll, again, develop that when we get there. But these are the points I want us to keep in mind as we go through these qualifications. Don't be thinking, well, my granddaddy said this is what it meant, or this is what I believe it means. What does the Word say? That is our standard. And then the last one, or next to last one, we have to remember that some qualities that we're going to look at are absolute and some are relative. Now let me define what I mean. By absolute, I mean it's a quality that an individual either has or does not have. It cannot be possessed in different measures or in varying degrees. A good example of this is a man is either a husband of one wife or he's not. You can't be almost a husband. You can't be kind of a husband. You either are a husband of one wife or you are not. It is absolute in nature. But then we have those that are relative. And that means they can be possessed in varying degrees. They involve virtues in which individuals grow and in which they become proficient without attaining perfection. Therein lies the trap for many of us. We demand our elders be perfect. Perfect. Only one man was ever perfect. And I don't believe he's an elder at Stoney Creek. Our elders are not to be perfect men. We are not to expect that of them. There are some qualifications are absolute. They either are or they aren't. But then there are some where there are varying degrees. Are they showing a proficiency? Demonstrating, that's the word I was trying to think of, a proficiency in that particular quality. That is what we have to look at. Do not demand elders be perfect, but expect them to be faithful. That is what we as a congregation must be looking for. There has been many a good men that wanted to serve as an elder, desired to serve as an elder, and when their name was put forth, there were those that would squash them down in a heartbeat because they weren't perfect. And that's what it boiled down to. Oh, they may hem and haw around some kind of an excuse, but it's because perfection was not attained, and that's what the individual had in their own mind. We cannot expect men to be perfect. If we do, we're going to be disappointed every single time. We just need our elders to be faithful. And so today, as we get into the idea or the discussion regarding qualifications, this sermon in particular is going to focus around the desire to have the responsibility. Now, it's impossible to read this text, notice the absence of a particular quality. It's not mentioned in Titus. In Titus chapter 1, the thought of a man desires a good work, it's not there. So why do I feel like we need to spend some time on it if it's not in Titus? Well, some people may say, well, it doesn't matter. If you're just going to look at Titus and that's it, you're not going to take into consideration anything else, then it does not specify that a man must desire the work. So therefore, he can be forced in at gunpoint. He can be appointed by committee. Endless opportunities at that point. But let's reason through this. The need for desire is stated elsewhere. In 1 Timothy 3 and verse 1. One of the passages that we would have open when going through the qualifications of an elder, it says, this is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. That's number one when it comes to how Paul wrote to Timothy. That if a man desires the position, he desires a good work. Peter would write in 1 Peter 5 and verse 2, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly. Not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. Not by compulsion, not being forced into the situation, but willingly doing it. Volunteering oneself for the service. And once we know these verses, it's impossible to unknow them. And let me explain why this is important. Because when we start talking about qualifications of elders, when we start discussing what makes a good elder, they are always going to come to mind, even if your primary text is in Titus. You're always going to have in your mind what 1 Timothy has and what Peter wrote. You're not going to be able to just box them out. You have to take everything collectively. So how do we reconcile Paul not mentioning it in the letter to Titus? And I will be very upfront to my mind this week. I have wrestled and I have wrestled with this idea. Why didn't Paul say the same thing to Titus? Why did he mention it to Timothy but not to Titus? Oh, it would have been so much easier if he just would have said it. Then we could just address the qualification and move on. But I talked to several godly men this week whom I respect greatly about their take on this thorn in my side, and was given some very good answers about why it's not found in Titus. First, let's remember Titus already had information given to him by Paul. Paul said he left Titus in Crete to appoint elders as I commanded you. We don't know what those previous commands were, do we? We're not privy to what was specifically told Titus. But what we can be confident of is that it would not contradict what others had been told. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 33, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints." Paul is not going to write to Timothy and say, well, a man has to desire it, and then over here in Titus, it's going to mean something else that you can force a man into. It's not going to disagree with each other like that. We can be confident that whatever instruction Paul had given Timothy, he gave the exact same instruction to Titus, whether we have record of it or not. Paul would not expect Titus to force men into service, where Titus was going from town to town saying, you are now an elder, you are now an elder, and you are an elder. No, that's not what Paul wanted Titus to do. Nor would Titus stand for men being forced into service, where there are groups trying to stack the deck in their favor. We're going to have men that think the way we think and want things done the way we want to have things done, and we're going to put them in this position of authority so that we can ensure they're done the right way. Now, Titus wouldn't stand for that either. Brother Wesley illustrated it for me like this, and it really helped to understand why it wasn't mentioned in Titus. But he said, let's take the statement, John Doe is a Christian. Now, contained within the statement is the realization that John Doe wanted to become a Christian. If John Doe is a Christian, there was a desire there to begin with. The same principle can be applied to what we find in Titus. The desire is inherent within the position. So Titus is going to be appointing those men that wanted to have that responsibility. He's not going to talk to those that didn't. He's not going to consider appointing those who didn't. Only those who did. Now I want to talk about desire for just a moment. You know, some men desire power. They like to be the head of things. They like to be able to point and have people do things. Some people desire prominence. They want to be considered the top guy, have their name in lights, so to speak. Neither of these are the mark of a qualified man. If that is what their desire is, where they want to have authority over others, where they want to be known as being someone, then they are not qualified. Paul states that it is the work, that it is the responsibility that needs to be desired. That is what he wrote to Timothy. He desires a good work. The role, what is involved in being an elder, the responsibilities of being an elder, is that which is to be desired. The word desire actually signifies the mental effort of stretching oneself out for a thing. But the stress, the importance is being placed upon the object desired, not the one that's doing the stretching. The importance is on what you are trying to reach. And so when it comes to considering an elder that desires the work, the stress is put on the work and the responsibility that entails desire. And we may think, well, isn't that just borrowing trouble? Look at all the problems elders have to deal with. Why would anybody desire? Rather than that's how God designed it. Bottom line, do they do it because it's a barrel full of laughs? Absolutely not. There are highs, there are lows, there are good times, there are bad times. But it all comes with making sure the Lord's church operates as it ought. That is their desire. How does this typically play out then? Whenever we're thinking about a man being appointed as an elder, let's consider a hypothetical for a minute. Based on what I have observed, okay? Based on what I have observed and what I know, I'm convinced that Steve Smith, hypothetical name, I didn't want to use anybody's real name just to not make any problems. But we're going to pretend that Steve Smith is a sound, faithful member here at Stoney Creek. And I believe that he has met all the qualifications to be a godly elder. And I think he would be a right fit for that position. So what I do is I end up going up to Brother Steve Smith and I ask him, I said, are you willing to serve as an elder? Or do you desire that position? You know, we have to make it sound very clinical, don't we? Whenever we talk to people about this, it's almost like just a very formal way, right? But I would go up to him, I said, are you willing to serve as an elder? I believe you're qualified and that the church could really use you as one of its leaders. Brother Steve Smith says, well, thank you for the vote of confidence. You know, I really am thankful that you view me in that way, but I really don't want to. I don't desire it. Typically, here's what the end would be. I would leave the discussion. I would walk away thinking, well, he's qualified, but he doesn't desire it. He has all the qualifications, but he doesn't desire the position. In all actuality, based on his response, he's not qualified. He's not qualified. Like I said, based on everything I know of him, based on everything I had observed, I would say this man is qualified, but he has just demonstrated that he's not. Because a man has to desire it, right? He has to want to serve in that capacity, but I want you to think of it in this way. I want you to consider, is he being self-willed? Why is it he's saying no? Why is it he's saying, I don't want to serve God in that way? Is he putting himself first? One of the qualifications found in Titus 1 verse 7 is an elder cannot be self-willed. Does he really love that which is good? When he's saying, you know what, I might be able to serve the church here in a great way and be a great asset, but I really don't want to. Does that demonstrate a man that really loves what is good? I would be hard-pressed to say that it does. Gentlemen, why would we not want to serve God in this amazing way? Why would any of us want to sit back and say, I'm content to just be a pew rider for the rest of my days? I'll serve, I'll get up, I'll lead singing, I'll teach Bible classes, but when it comes to being an elder, nope, I don't want to do that. Why? What is different about your life that's different from the life of an elder? If we're living a faithful Christian life, then we will be qualified. Now, I will preface that by saying there are some instances where a man cannot and will not ever be qualified due to past mistakes and maybe even circumstances that were beyond his control. That's a separate group, okay? And I understand that. But men, we should be living our lives in a way so that we're preparing ourselves to serve in the greatest capacity that we can. Do you think that you are going to wake up one day and all of a sudden be qualified? That when you're reaching your golden years, right? You're going to wake up one day and be like, well, you know what? I think I might be an elder now. Do you go from being not qualified one day to all of a sudden being qualified the next morning? No, it takes a lifetime of preparation. It takes living in such a way that you are working towards that goal. Why do we think that churches are not having men qualified to be elders? It's because no one desired it long ago, when they were young, when they were teens, when they were impressionable. And they grew up being a Christian, but not being an elder Christian. If we want to have faithful leaders in the Lord's church, we have to have men that are preparing now, that are deciding now that that's how I want to serve, and I'm going to live my life in such a way that I am qualified. That I am going to be conscious of the decisions I make and how it's going to affect me in my future. Not just my future when it comes to where I'm going to spend eternity, but my future and how I can be useful in the Lord's church. One issue is responsibility has become a dirty word in society. And people are actually encouraged to avoid it. Don't take responsibility. Always pass the buck on to somebody else. If you can blame someone else for your mistakes, then do it. That is trickling over into the church to where we don't want to be held responsible for anything. I don't want to be held responsible for your salvation. I have a hard enough time with my own salvation. Is that how we justify it? We shouldn't be thinking in those terms. Not my monkeys, not my circus. I don't have any skin in the game. Right? I didn't die for this church. I didn't pay for this church. It's not my church. How many times do we say that? It's not our church, it's the Lord's church. Well, we take that to heart a little too much. To where now we don't even care about the leadership within the church. All we are concerned with is how I am doing and how my family is doing. We are too comfortable just sitting back and looking at only ourselves. And if I can find a time to encourage brother or sister so-and-so, then I'm going to go out of my way. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. The Lord established His church and entrusted its oversight to men who are not perfect, but faithful in their service. That is what we need to lead the Lord's church. And what a privilege it is to serve in such a capacity. That you are concerned with the well-being of people's spirituality. We stand up here and we say day after day that we're all here to help each other on this walk. We're all here to get to the same place, and we're doing it as a family. But many times we act as if we're not. And when it comes to the congregation, I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be a leader. We are called to be leaders in our lives. We are called to watch out for each other. And we need faithful men who are willing to step up and say, I'm going to ensure that the Lord's church is taken care of, that she is watched after, that she is fed, that she is nurtured, protected. We do it for our own families. Won't you do it for God's family? I wanted to spend more time on this particular quality this evening because it seems to be the determining factor in many situations. I would hazard a guess that probably 80% of the time, if a man did not want to be an elder, he said, I don't desire it. Have you ever went and asked a man about being an elder and he actually said, well, I have a problem with self-control. I just can't rein in my temper. No. Has anybody answered, well, I just love my money too much. I'm greedy. I just want to get all the money I can. I want to fill that bank account. No, I doubt anybody's ever said that. But see, many times this is used even if it is used to mask the real issue. Oh, because you can say, oh, I don't really desire that. I don't want to do that. Without really revealing too much about yourself, can you? You don't want to be too vulnerable, do you? We have to understand what the purpose of desire is. We have to understand that we can see desire in the life of an individual. And what we have to ask ourselves, if we're not desiring to serve the Lord to the fullest of our potential, then what are we really desiring? Do we want to serve God to the fullest? Or do we want to serve ourselves and fit God in where we can? And if we really take a good long look in that mirror, many of us will find out that it's the second. Where we want to serve ourselves and we want to include God in that. We need to serve God first and foremost above all else. We need to tailor our lives around serving Him. That's one amazing thing I can remember about studying Abraham in school. Was he built an altar, and then he pitched his tent around it. He didn't build a tent and then pitch his altar. Serving God came first to him. And he was going to do that no matter what it required. If he had to move locations, he moved locations. If he had to go over here instead of being over here, that's what he was going to do. Nothing was going to pull him away from that service. But many times we think our altar's portable. And we're going to pitch our altar where it's convenient within our lives. We have things backwards, brethren, when that is what desire is. We all need to desire to serve God to the fullest of our potential. And in the best way that we know how. Only then will the church be successful. That means we need godly elders. We need godly deacons. We need godly wives. We need godly servants. We can't have everyone being an elder. We can't have everybody being a deacon. There is diversity within what is expected. But let's aspire to serve to the fullest of what we are able. Talking about desiring, if you have not submitted yourself to God's plan of salvation, you are in fact desiring to serve yourself. You're putting yourself first. Oh, you may think you've attained salvation in a different way. No, there's only one way. Salvation requires humility and denial of self. Not self-service, but self-denial. Do not let pride keep you from eternal life. How awful would it be to have heard God's plan of salvation time after time, refusing to submit yourself to, and then on Judgment Day, that is when you realize it was my pride that kept me from heaven. Just because I wouldn't submit to God's plan. Why don't you obey God's plan today and begin living sound doctrine? If you are not a Christian, we invite you now to come and be placed into Christ by submitting to the plan that God has left us. If you are a Christian, you have sins in your life. Let us pray with you and for you, that those sins be forgiven and that you live a better life for God. However you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, do so right now as together we stand and sing.